Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I want to talk to you about the latest episode of Monarch, Legacy of Monsters. As the episode begins, we're at a Monarch command post in Alaska, where we find Kate in a cell, separated from the others who are also in separate cells, all of them being monitored. May is interrogated by a Monarch operative who questions who she really is because she had a couple of false passports on her person, and also questions her as to whether or not there is a backup of the copy of the files that she made. This interrogator then goes and talks with the other guy from Monarch about how the kids don't seem to know anything, to which the guy responds by saying that they should be recruited into Monarch, which the interrogator and the other lady from Monarch don't really want to do. So instead, they decide to just let them go and observe them, but they keep Colonel Shaw. The kids are set free with new passports, money, phones, and plane tickets, to which they respond by calling the guy handing them these things a dick and an asshole, to which he responds a bit gruffly by telling them they're lucky to be alive and that they were saved and that they need to keep their noses out of shit. For her part, May fully intends to take advantage of this and go back home to Tokyo, but Kate and her brother don't want to stop looking for their dad, and they seem to convince May that they can't split up because they're safer if the three of them are together. Meanwhile, Colonel Shaw is shown footage of himself with Kate's mother and Bill Randa from back in the day before he's interrogated by the interrogating woman, who we now know is named Verdugo. And in their conversation, he seems to indicate that there's stuff he didn't tell the kids, despite the fact that, as is pointed out to him, he almost got them killed. And when he's asked whether he ever thought about the fact that maybe the kid's father didn't want this life for them, he says he doesn't know, but that he'll ask him when he sees him, at which point he's told he's not going anywhere. The other two Monarch people have a conversation as they're observing the interrogation about how it is that Colonel Shaw doesn't look like a 90-plus-year-old man, and it would seem that there are in fact rumors about some type of mission gone bad that might explain it, but we don't get the details. The kids head to San Francisco, and it seems that it's still massively damaged from Godzilla's attack. Someone named James, who is apparently Kate's mother's boyfriend, arrives to pick them up at the airport at the behest of Kate's mother, despite the fact that Kate had called a rideshare, and they're taken to a FEMA camp where I guess people displaced by the attack are living. Kate very abruptly and without any warming her up to it at all, introduces her half-brother to her mother, who, in addition to being a bit of a MILF, seemed distressed but not surprised to hear of his existence. And in fact, it turns out she sent Kate to Japan originally to see what her dad had been up to, obviously suspecting something, and to get Kate out of her room where she spent all her time after losing her students, avoiding seeking help for her trauma. Apparently, Kate's mother and James have access to a reconstruction area in the city, and they smuggled the kids in the back of a box truck because the kids want to investigate Kate's father's San Francisco office. So they're dropped off by Kate's mother and James, as James and her mother go about whatever work they're supposed to do in the zone, saying that they'll be back to pick them up in the morning before the gates are closed. Colonel Shaw's interrogation continues, and the lady threatens to bury him super deep versus shallow, like where he was buried, quote-unquote, buried before, to which he responds by saying, "Really? Okay, well, whatever, but Monarch's wrong and has been for a long time." Then we get a flashback to 2 days before G-Day, when apparently Kate and her girlfriend met for coffee at their favorite spot before her girlfriend encourages her to move in with her rather than spend a fortune on the apartment she's renting, and she agrees to do so. Then time jumps forward to 1 day before G-Day, and it would seem that the prospect of a Titan attack was public knowledge, and that the school she works at was preparing to shut down and evacuate in the event of an attack in the wake of the Godzilla and King Kong fight. Kate continues to have flashbacks to G-Day itself as well, and apparently Kate and her girlfriend got separated, despite the fact that they didn't have to, because Kate's boss offered to chaperone the bus that Kate eventually went on in her place, but she didn't take her up on it. In 2015, the kids are hiding because some troops on patrol in the area seem to have seen them, but Kentaro seems to convince them that what they saw was a cat by luring a cat out into the open by tossing out a snack bag. But it isn't long before they're actually spotted by the troops as they continue to try to get to the kid's dad's office. As they're hiding and running from the soldiers, Kate continues to have traumatic flashbacks to G-Day, and the troops end up seeing some other people messing around in the same building that they're hiding in, and end up chasing them as the kids move on towards their goal, though Kate seems to have trouble being able to continue because she's suffering from a sort of panic attack due to her PTSD. As she gets closer and closer to the office and gets deeper and deeper into San Francisco, the memories just keep coming back, and it's taking a toll on her. She then has a conversation with her brother that sort of mirrors the conversation she had with her dad the last time she saw him, when her brother goes off on his own to try to find a way for them to continue their mission to get out of the part of the building they're in. And she has to sit down, at which point May tries to help her with a breathing exercise as she continues to have flashbacks to the last time she saw her father and the last time she saw her girlfriend, followed by another flashback to the morning of the day before G-Day, where she wakes up in bed with a woman who is not the girlfriend we've been seeing up to this point. And it would seem, in another part of the flashback, that she and the girlfriend we've been seeing up to this point had some kind of falling out right before G-Day in the 2 days between the time we first saw her with the girlfriend and G-Day, which I don't understand, but maybe we'll see more about that later. Finally, at the father's office, the kids find a map and compare it to another image in the father's files. And by using incoming sunlight, they overlay points on a paper copy of that other image onto the map. And it seems to indicate their father's path and where he was going after Alaska, seemingly following Titan activity. Before the episode ends, May sneaks off to make another secret phone call, and it turns out she's calling one of the Monarch operatives, indicating that she's been working with them. So that's where the episode ended, and I have to say, I really liked this episode. Last week, I didn't think too much of, but I really liked this episode. I think it was very cryptic and, dropped a lot of, clues, even if they were kind of vague, or it brought up, different parts of the mystery. And, in that way, furthered this story of what was the father up to? What did he know? What do we not know that we're going to find out? That's obviously not great news from the tone of everything. Why doesn't Monarch know what the father knew? What does Monarch know? Why the heck is May working with them? How long has she been working with them? Just all kinds of crazy, interesting stuff. I thought that Kurt Russell did a great job as Colonel Shaw in this episode. His scenes were really, really well done. And, he commanded the screen in those scenes, if you ask me, and just came off very strongly. And I really liked the character. The stuff with Kate and her mom was good, but I think the best parts of the episode were the parts that we saw more of Kate's past and what her life was like before G-Day. And as such, we now know that she had what looks like 2 girlfriends, one of whom she was lying to, if not both of them. Looks like actually she was lying to both of them. And we continued to see how the trauma of what happened during the Godzilla attack affects her to this day, how she's dealing with the PTSD and how it's, really weighing on her, which is still happening to the degree that it's happening, it would seem, because she never sought treatment. And it just was really great character stuff to see all of that, because I think by the end of the series, if not the season, you're going to see her overcome all of that or start to overcome it. And May even says to her, while she's trying to calm her down, the only way out is through, which of course means you have to face this stuff and work through it. You can't just keep burying it and not dealing with it. So I think we're going to see more of that. And I think that's good stuff. And I think the actress playing Kate does a great job with that stuff. You really feel it. You really believe it. And we did get some flashbacks of the Godzilla attack in this episode, and even a brief, small, shot of the Godzilla King Kong fight from Godzilla v. Kong. But we didn't even need that, because the human story really carried this episode. The human characters really carried this episode, which was true of the first couple of episodes. Though, like I said last week, it kind of fell off. That part wasn't as intriguing as it had been and as it was in this episode. So I really liked this episode quite a bit. It was a return to form for me. And I find it interesting because if you saw my review of Godzilla -1, or even if you saw Godzilla -1, you know that the whole thing with that movie was the human drama and how good the human drama of that film is, and not so much the monster stuff. You know how the monster stuff in that movie was really just the backdrop against which the human story was being told, and that it could have been anything. A natural disaster like a weather event, the throes of war as opposed to the aftermath of war, or any other sort of antagonistic set of circumstances, and the movie would still be great because it's about the human characters. And this is the same thing. The human characters in this are really good, and the writing is really good, which is also interesting because, I enjoyed Godzilla and Godzilla King of Monsters and Godzilla versus Kong, but I didn't think they were anything special. They weren't great films. They're very good visually. They're good Godzilla action movies, but I didn't think they were anything special in terms of narrative. And this show takes place in that same universe, yet it's got a great narrative. So I'm happy for that. And I hope that this is something they'll pick up in the next Godzilla movie, which we already know is coming soon, but that remains to be seen. Anyway, this is a good show, and I'm glad this episode was much better than the previous one and as good as the first couple. And I'm looking forward to next week, at which point I will be back, of course, to do a recap and review of the episode. I'm going to get out of here for now. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.